Welcome. This is the second session of Mishnah in-depth Menachot with Rabbi Joshua Kulp. It's a pleasure to have him back, both teaching here and in Daf Shavui, and we really appreciate him. Mishnah in-depth is sponsored in memory of Rifka Rosenwein by her family. Sources for today's class will be posted in chat. They are the same sources from the previous week. And with that, I'm going to hand over the mic to Rabbi Kulp.
All right. Well, if you're listening to this recording, we are going to get started now. Last week, I just want to get to the doc. Last week, I believe we finished more or less till the end of chapter 3. And I think that the beginning of chapter 4 is fun. We are probably not going to cover in this class every single Mishnah in Menachot. It is a long, and if you have been learning it, not an easy Masechet, very technical. There's a lot of psukim, a lot going on here, but let's learn. Let's not just talk about how hard the material is, because Mishnah is often very difficult. And I would rather just sit and explain some mishnayot to you. So the end of chapter 3, let's just show where we were. In chapter 3, we began with a topic that what prevents the fulfillment of the rest of something else. So maybe I'll go back over here to Mishnah Hay, Hakometz miuto me'akevet rubo. So if you have the kometz is the handful, if you can't put the whole handful, then half the handful is going to prevent fulfilling the whole handful, right? Because the kometz is one integral thing. We kind of rushed through at the end last time about this notion that if you don't fulfill, when is it that if you don't fulfill the whole mitzvah, you can't fulfill any of the mitzvah? And sometimes you can
Ma'akev.
fulfill, right, me'akev, right? You hear that a lot. Sometimes it's like something's me'akev. For instance, is very famous that a bracha is eina me'akevet, right? You can fulfill a mitzvah without a bracha. Right. So, you should, but it comes up. I'll give you an example. If you're not sure whether you did a bracha or not, let's say you're not sure you did the mitzvah. You don't remember whether you did the lulav or not. Comes the middle of the day, you don't remember, did I pick up the lulav this morning or did I not pick up the lulav this morning? What you should do is you should pick up the lulav because there's no reason not to pick up a lulav. But you're not supposed to say the brachot because if you already did the bracha, then 2 times the bracha is a bracha levatala, an unnecessary bracha. But that's only possible because the bracha and mitzvot are 2 separate entities. Right? So that's the kind of thing that the Mishnah is talking about over here. It comes up a lot, even in modern halacha. I'll give you maybe another example in Havdalah. Right, the one thing doesn't me'akev the other. Right, you can't do hamavdil ben kodesh lachol, but let's say you really couldn't get any fire, something like that. Really couldn't get fire, but you have besamim, or maybe like sometime, I don't know, you're in the middle of nowhere and you can't get fire and you can't wait the next day. I mean, I don't want to there may be cases where you could just wait till the next day or something like that. But let's say you really couldn't do it. You can still do Mavdil ben Kodesh Chol without the Aish and without the Bisami. All right. But we're going to deal with a little more.
Well, don't we
technical.
sometimes we make Havdalah sometimes when we only have, let's say
Exactly.
on Yom Tov or something like that. We do it, we don't use Besamim when it's from
Yeah.
Shabbos to
Or
Yom
Aish.
Tov, right?
The fire is only used for after Shabbat and after Yom Kippur.
Right.
Right? But it's not used for the Chagim, for the holidays. And sure, that's a great example. But even on Shabbat, right? If you couldn't find something, I don't know, you were in, I don't know, some place where you really couldn't, they really won't let you light a fire and you have no matches or something like that. Right. I don't know about waiting the next day because that's a whole nother can of worms waiting the next day. I don't want to make a definitive statement on that. All right. So we're back to the mincha. Right. The mincha, one of the main things is to take the komets, the handful, and throw it onto the altar. That's what the priests do with the mincha. And if you don't have all of it, a komets miuto me'akevet rubo. So if you don't have all of it, you can't throw half of a komets. It's got to be the whole thing. Some of it fell out of your hand, you got a problem, right, before it hit the mizbeach. Ha'isaron, so too, with the tenth of the ephah. That's how much flour is in most menachot. Some have two, right? You can't put less than that. Right? Part of it would prevent you from filling all of it. Hayayin, the same thing with the
Nesach.
libations for the wine. Miuto me'akevet rubo. And the same thing for the shemen. Shemen miuto me'akevet rubo. So, but this is just saying that you need the full thing, right? It's not even really it's not even really a question. You have to put the whole komets, the whole tenth of the flour, the whole wine, the whole oil. Hasolid ve'hashemen me'akvin nezeh. So the flour and the wine, you can't do those without the other. And that's if you look at all of the verses, it's always solet and berula b'shemen, right? Solet mixed in with oil. You can't separate them. So if you didn't have flour, you can't just offer oil and vice versa. Hakometz v'halevona me'akvin zeh. So and both of those are put onto the altar. The komets is the handful, and the frankincense is put onto the
Is the
altar.
spike, right?
Right, that's the spices, the incense. That's put onto the altar, and you need both of those to go on the altar. You can't do one without the other, right? And we could show this comes out of certain psukim. I don't know if it's worth going back and looking for the psukim, but it's basically they go hand in hand. Anything that goes on the altar goes hand in hand with the other things that go onto the altar in
And which altar are we talking about?
the external altar. Yeah, the mincha goes on the same altar that the
Animal.
korbanot, right? There's only two, and the livonah here also goes on that altar. There's a special the incense. There's a special incense altar that was closer to that was
Inside.
inside the heichal. It was inside, but that's not the incense here is an incense that accompanies animal sacrifices or grain sacrifices. That's the large external usual common altar.
Right. With the ramp.
Yeah, with the ramp and giant, right? A very big thing. They're walking around. They've got got to walk around. I think
Right.
the Mizbeach HaKetoret,
Is
the
small.
incense altar was very small. Yeah, like very small. Right? Incense is small. You're going to sacrifice multiple bulls every day.
Right.
You're going to need a lot of meat on the altar. All right, so now we go through, and it's it's interesting. All of the different things here. It's good to get the terms. It's like one of these mishnayot that just goes through a lot of terms. Shnei Sirei Yom HaKippurim Me'akvin Zeh. So you've got two, right? You've got the Seir Azazel, and then you've got one that, that's the one that's brought out into the wilderness, and then you've got the one that's offered in the as a sacrifice. You can't do one without the other, right? If one should run away, that would be it. You wouldn't be able to offer. Let's say the Seir Azazel runs away before you get to do it. Done. You can't do the other one. Shnei kifsei ha'atzeret me'akvin zeh. So, by the way, Mishnah's set up in a nice order with numbers. It goes shnaim, shnaim, shnaim. It's just an easy format here. So there are two lambs offered on Shavuot. Atzeret is Shavuot. The rabbis never use the word Shavuot. They always call it Atzeret. So without they're a couple. Without one, you can't do the other. Shtei chalot me'akvot zedzo. This is the two chalot that
On
are also
Shavuot.
on
Right.
Shavuot, right? You can't do one of those without the other. Shnei sdarim. You want to do a little quiz? The seder. You know what a seder is? Anyone know what a seder? I don't want to put people on the spot if it makes you uncomfortable. But sometimes people like quizzes.
No, I
Like,
agree, but I don't know what it is.
Okay.
like a seder, like a collection of books.
Nope. No. It's the showbread. The showbread has
Ah,
two orders,
Oh,
right? You've got two rows of six. So you can't have one row without the other. I don't think you can have like a missing showbread either, right? There's 12 showbread, 6 and 6. You can't have like 5 and 4 either. You need to have, I believe, all full 6. And you can't, maybe there was like, you might have thought that if you had at least one Seder, that would be enough. No go. You need both of them. Shnei bizikin ma'akzin zeh. This is a little bit more xor.
is that the
Uh,
menorah something?
no, you know what? A bazik could also be the cup on the menorah, but it's not here because the menorah would have 7. And we'll get to the menorah a little bit later on. The bazikin are the cups of incense that went next to the showbread. The showbread has a little cup of incense that goes next to each of them. It's the word bezich is a rabbinic word, but the Torah talks about let me see if I can find it here. There's so many pages in this doc that I don't want to. Let me see if I can find the showbread over here. Where is it? Oh, here it is. Yeah, here. These are the verses from Vayikra Kaf Dalin here in Zion. Venatata al hamarechet. Like you should put on the whole arrangement. Livonazaka. V'haitav lechem la'azkara isher Adonai. Right, that it's going to be a remembrance for God. Right, the incense doesn't gets put onto the altar. And the showbread gets eaten by the Kohanim. So that's the rabbis. The word here, al, I believe later on in our Mishnah, it gets debated. What does it mean on? Does it mean on the bread? Or does it mean like al can just mean,
Accompanying.
yeah, exactly. Al doesn't always mean exactly on something. It's one of those words that gets debated occasionally what it means. Yeah. Okay. Going on. Hasdarim v'habizikin ma'akzvin zeh. So the showbread and the incense bowls prevent the fulfillment of another. It means you can't do, if you just have bread and you don't have incense, you can't do the whole thing. You need the incense and the bread. Now we get a lot of lists here. Shnei minim sheba nazir. These are two Nazarite sacrifices. Shlosha sheba para, arba sheba todah. So these are the
Paraduma.
para aduma, correct? That's the hyssop and the scarlet
The
and
Tolat Shani, right?
that's the tolat shani. Wait, I'm just trying to remember. What's the other one?
Eitz Azov.
That's the whatchamacallit. That's the
Hyssop.
hyssop. That's the hyssop. What was the other one? Oh, the cedar wood, the cedar. Right. You have to have eight
Eitz
erez,
Erez. Yeah.
ve'ezov shni tolat, right? The scarlet, right? And then you burn them all and put them into the water there. You need them all. But good. The para here is the paraduma. Arba shebetoda are the four
What
types of
types of
wood.
bread? No?
Good. All right. Arba shebelulav. That one,
Minim.
yeah. Arba shebemitsura. This is a
He
little
has
harder.
different types of carbonate he has to bring.
Partly. There's two birds, but I think they're set free. Right? They're not korbanot, if I remember correctly. And then you need the same things. The mitzora gets applied, the same things that are in the para. So you've got two birds. You've got the eitz erez, ezo vishnitolat. I don't remember why it's 4 and not 5. In any case, makvin zed. All of those things, you need the whole arrangement. Sheva hazayot shebepara. Remember what a hazaya is?
The spritzing, that's for the
Good.
Kohen. The
The
Kohen
spritzing.
Gadol, no?
All right. Well, this is not the Kohen Gadol. This is the para. There's the 7 for Yom Kippur. There's a
Right.
whole series of 7, but also to purify somebody from tamei meit, from tumat meit, from purity of a corpse impurity. He needs to
Okay.
have 7 administrations of the para water, of the waters there with the
I didn't know he
ashes.
needed 7. Okay.
Yeah, so he has to have that twice. Um, um, yeah, although Albeck says also that he puts it onto the Pnei Ohel Moed, right? But the para here is the red heifer.
Paraduma, right.
Yeah. Sheva Hazayot. Oh no, this is the other one. Sheva Hazayot Shel Bein Habed Badim. That's the between the curtains. That's on Yom Kippur. V'Sha'al HaParochet, also on Yom Kippur. V'Sha'al Mizbeach HaZahav, I believe, is also on Yom Kippur. They're all Makvod Zozo. You can't do 6. Right? You have to do all 7, otherwise no good.
And that's of the Paraduma, or that's the blood?
No, that's the blood from the
Blood.
korban. Yeah, that's the
Right,
blood from the
right.
korban. Those are the blood from the korban. The hazayot sheba para is the paraduma, the water, and the hazayot.
And the
These other
others are
ones
the blood spritzing.
blood spritzing. Yeah. Shiva k'nei menorah me'akvin zeh. Right, so that makes sense, right? You can't have 6,
Right.
right? Shiva neiroteha me'akvin zeh. So the kanim are the
Branches.
right? The branches, and the nerotea are the cups that hold the oil in them, and the wicks in them. Shtei parshiot shebemuzuzah ma'akvot zo et zo. Right? We've got 2 parshiot. Right? Remember, Kriyat Shema, we have 3, but the last one is not there. because there's that's only the first in the V'ahavta and the Shema and the V'hayim Shamoa are there. And you can't have one. And here you get the Chumra Va'afilu K'tav Echad Me'akvan. Even one missing letter prevents the fulfillment. That's why people are so strict about
Okay.
tefillin and mezuzahs, especially. Arba parshiot shebetfilin makvot zo et zo. So you got the 4 parshiot in the Torah that mention tefillin. That would be the first 2 of Kriyat Shema, and then the other 2 from Shemot. Those prevent fulfillment, right? You can't have 3. You need both. Again, va'afilu k'tav echad me'akvan. Right. By the way, it's interesting. I'm always curious about the editing of the Mishnah. That's part of my scholarly mind. You had like 2, then 3, then 4, then 7, and now we're back to 2 again.
Right.
So I think probably it's because we're like out of I don't know this conclusively, but we're out of the Beit HaMikdash here. Up until here, everything were Beit HaMikdash things. Right. Once you get to the mezuzah and the tefillin, it's like a new
That's
list.
klaf.
Right. It has nothing to do with the temple anymore. It's just outside of the temple mitzvot. So my guess is that somebody has a list here of all the things and sacrifices and various things in the Beit HaMikdash, clearly ordered them in order, right? You've got 2, 2, 2, 3, 4, mostly 2s, and then a lot of 7s. And then in the middle, also you can see is a good example of like the numbering of the Mishnah sometimes is random. Numbering of Mishnah doesn't
This is
always.
Zion.
Yeah, it really should be broken off over here. It should be like this should go up there, right? You see what I'm pointing over there? Because that's all in the maybe someone started thinking, well, the menorah isn't really blood, it's not really a sacrifice. Most of the rest of the things were either foods or sacrifices. The menorah is a little bit different, but the menorah is in the Beit HaMikdash and the tefillin and the mezuzah are not. Right. The only problem with that is there's an interesting one with that. What about the lulav? Right? Why is the lulav in the Mikdash list and not in the mezuzah in the tefillin list? And the answer probably is the lulav was a big tekes, a big ceremony in the Beit HaMikdash. Right? There's plenty of evidence, in the Mishnah of Sukkah. I don't know if you learned the Mishnah of Sukkah, but the 4th and 5th chapters of Mishnah of Sukkah, and even part of the 3rd chapter, actually 4th and 5th chapters only, I think, are all about the lulav and the arava in the Beit HaMikdash. So the lulav and the lulav is, I like to tell students this, it's really the only thing. It's the closest thing that we do. Maybe not the only thing, but it's certainly the closest thing that we actually do that they did, not in the same exact way, but like they did that in the Beit HaMikdash. We don't do any animal sacrifices. Maybe a synagogue has a menorah, but it's not really the same thing. But and it's not a mitzvah anymore. The lulav is one of the few mitzvot that survived the temple and moved on to the synagogue, right? Because it's not a sacrifice. That's the easiest thing. You don't put the lulav, you don't burn it on an altar. So without a sacrifice, you can take something from the mikdash and bring it out. And that's probably why the lulav is up here, because the Mishnah is thinking of it as originally as a temple mitzvah, and only later on is it become a synagogue or a home mitzvah.
Question.
Yeah.
Could it be that the menorah, I was thinking that all those things are things that people can do in their homes. I was thinking of a Chanukiah. They weren't cognizant of that at that time?
Well, several answers. First of all, the Gemara says you're not allowed to make a 7-branch menorah at home. You're not
No,
allowed.
but let's say 8, but they would have
wouldn't be the
used
7. Right. You can't make.
Oh, Shiva. I see.
Right. You can't
Shiva.
make
I
a
get it. I
menorah. You
get it.
can't make
Right,
a
right, right.
menorah in your house. You're not supposed to
I
do that.
see. I see. I skipped the word Shiva. I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
I see what
So,
you're saying.
yeah,
Right,
and as
right.
far as like the Chanukiah, the way we think of there's a lot on this, and maybe someday I'll give a shiur on. I love teaching about Hanukkah. They didn't have, for as far as I can tell, the earliest like Chanukah, the word Chanukiah is a modern invention.
Right.
They just call it the Hanukkah menorah shel Chanukah.
Right.
I think whatchamacallit, Ben Yehuda invented the word Chanukiah, I believe. Right? I don't like the word Chanukiah. I don't know why. It's my own bone to pick. I try to call it the menorah shel Chanukah, but no one likes it when I do that. Because I don't like new words. They're like, Josh, it's 100 years old. It's not that new anymore. I'm like, that's new in Hebrew. But the way we have it with like metal or some other material and branches, they originally would have had little individual lamps. If you look in the
Right.
Talmud, they only talk about lamps, like individual. So maybe you would light the first night 1, 2, 1, 2, and 3, but creating one instrument where they're
Unit.
all on at one unit, I don't think that came around to the Middle Ages, and I'm not exactly sure when in the Middle Ages. Part of it is I don't think that they used, let's call it a candelabra. I don't think they used in the Middle Ages the same types of little lamps that they used in Eretz Yisrael in the first and second centuries. So they weren't really making a menorah for
Okay.
Hanukkah. Yeah, Hanukkah is interesting. The history of Hanukkah is. I was teaching this last year in another class, and I found on the internet a 250-page dissertation on the history of the Hanukkah menorah. But it was like written in the 1960s in Hebrew, and it was just like typewritten. It was very hard to read. And I just 250, I was teaching like one 45-minute shiur, and I just don't have the time to read 250-page book to teach one shiur on the thing. But
Got it.
it's very interesting. All right. Arba tzitziot me'akvot zo zo. Sha'arbatan mitzvah echad. There you can see, like in the pasuk, right? There's not like 4 different mitzvot, right? It's, put them on your corners of your beged, but that's one mitzvah, it's one pasuk. So you can't have, if you have 3 tzitzit, you're not fulfilling the mitzvah, and you shouldn't do a bracha, right? By the way, it's tough, because even if one of them is puzzle, then you really
Right.
shouldn't be doing the mitzvah. You shouldn't be doing the bracha. So I always have the problem because I'm always tempted to look at them on Shabbat, and you're not supposed to tighten them on Shabbat. So I try very hard. The rest of the week, I sit there and habitually tighten my tzitzit. Anyway, Rabbi Yishmael arba'atan arba mitzvot. Rabbi Yishmael disagrees. I don't think we hold like Rabbi Yishmael, but Rabbi Yishmael disagrees. Every one of them is an independent mitzvah, which means you could have 3, 2, 1. You're performing 4 mitzvah.
That works better for little boys.
Yeah, it would work better it would be a lot easier for all of us, right? Because then you wouldn't have to worry about one or the other. And it seems like a weird opinion. I don't know what the Gemara says about that, but it seems like an unusual opinion. All right, and then the 4th chapter continues with the same topic, which is also very interesting. Right. Why not put the combine this into like one chapter? I have a theory about that, is that and I told you I like to talk about the organization of the Mishnah. The prakim of the Mishnah are almost never too long. There are not really long prakim of the Mishnah. Why would that be? Because if you want to reference the usefulness of having a parak, if I want to tell you something is somewhere, and I just tell you it's in Masechet Menachot is very long. So it's better for me to tell you, oh, it's in Masechet Menachot, Parak Vav. They had prakim already in the Talmudic period. Prakim of the Mishnah existed in the Talmudic period. Separation into individual mishnayot didn't exist in the Talmudic period.
Really?
Yeah, you'll never find anyone in the Talmud saying, they might find them saying, look at Pirkei Kama, the first chapter of Ketubot, for instance. But they'll never say, look at the 3rd Mishnah of the first chapter, because that didn't exist. That numbering thing didn't exist. And even the truth is, even in editions of the Mishnah, there's not always stop. They don't always, even to modern editions, they don't always agree. Sometimes it gets a little confusing. Eventually, it got standardized for the most part, but even Rishonim never refer to a Mishnah by number. They'll say it's in the chapter 7 of Ketubot, but never chapter 7 Mishnah 3. Right. I
thought because they memorized it.
Even if you memorize something, it's helpful for people to have smaller chunks to memorize.
Right. That's why I thought they would keep it small. That's what I meant.
Yes. Yeah. So that's what I think it is too. Yeah. That's what it is too. Now, it could also be no. I think it's just because it's smaller, right? If you refer to something and it's too long, it's hard to find it, right? It would also be hard to find even in a book, right? If you
Then
have like 2 pages or something, I can skim it, but if it's 10 pages, it's much harder to skim. Anyway, you can see that these are the kinds of things I like to think about the putting together of the
the
Mishnah.
Uber. No,
Yeah, well,
it fascinates me too.
I have a PhD in Talmud, and that's the kind of thing they kind of talk about when we were learning about the formation of the Talmud, the development of the Talmud. How did it become the way it is today, and how did it get there? Um, I sort of have one foot planted in that world and one foot more in the rabbinic and halacha world. All right. Hatchelet eno me'akevet et haravan, ve'haravan eno me'akevet et tchelet. So tchelet and ravan, what's that? What are we talking about here?
Tzitzis.
The tzitzis, right? That's right. This is the tzitzit. So that's, by the way, how you know that we can have white tzitzit without the tchelet, right? If the tchelet eno me'akevet et haravan, you're supposed to put tchelet there. But if you don't have tchelet, you can have all ravan, all white. Right?
Could it be possible that already at that time they weren't sure about the tchelet?
I don't know enough of the history. I know that there are sugiot about the tchelet in the Gemara. I don't, I wouldn't say that this Mishnah is evidence of that because there's all these like the 4 parshiot of the Tefillin and the 2 parshiot of the mezuzah, and they had all that. I think they're talking more in theory in these mishnayot and
Okay.
not because they don't have something. But a deeper question would be why. That I don't, I don't know exactly why.
Maybe
Why?
to make them of equal valence, even though there's only one tchelet.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't like to answer questions I don't know. So I don't know. I don't, I don't know. I don't know. My feeling sometimes a lot is that there's midrash lying behind this, and it's like technical how they read the psukim, and not so much other kinds of motivations. But I don't know. I'm not like familiar enough with Mishnah Menachot the Bavli on Menachot. All right, Tfilah shel yad eno me'akevet shel rosh v'shel rosh. Eina me'akevet shel yad. I think we even mentioned that last week. That's the tefillin. Tefillah is the singular of tefillin, right? The yad and the rosh. And there you can see these are 2 different psukim. I don't think it's because they had trouble getting one or the other. It's just these are coming. They're 2 different, not just 2 different psukim. They're 2 different words, right? And so when it says about totafot beinecha, that doesn't mean that you, in order to have your totafot beinecha la'ot ayadecha, that you need to have both of them. They're 2 separate mitzvot. It's obviously preferable. This is also, by the way, the source of there's a big machlok between Sfardim and Ashkenazim. Sfardim say one bracha, and the Ashkenazim say two separate brachot. So, there's a long history to that, but that originates, I believe, in this, that they're separate mitzvot. All right, now we come back. Finally, it's like a jazz musician coming back to our topic, which is really menachot.
Menachos.
Yeah. Hasored v'hashemen einam me'akvin yain v'lo yain me'akvam. So the flour and the oil, we already said you
They
can't have flour
cancel.
without oil. But the wine is a separate libation. The wine is not mixed in with the flour and the oil. It's just poured on. We're talking here about the animal sacrifices that require a mincha to go along with them, which is the shlamim and the olah. Right?
Didn't we say the opposite?
No, we said the solet and the shemen ma'akvin zeh. The oil and the you can't have half of the solet or half of the shemen. But we never said that the yain and the solet have anything to do with each other.
Well, you also mentioned yayin.
Yeah, but the yain itself, a yain miuto me'akevet rubo. You need all of the yain.
Oh,
Right?
okay.
You can't
I'm sorry.
have parsh of the wine. Yeah, this is very confusing Mishnah, right? And that I think if you look at the psukim here, let me just make sure I don't lose my spot here on page 10. Here, if you look at the here, you can see it over here. This is the psukim about the sacrifices that require accompanying mincha. Vasiti mishera Hashem, ora o zevach, that's your animal. Lefalen neder unadava, for a voluntary one, obamoadechem, or holiday sacrifice, the musaf, or the musaf sacrifices, or other ones. Laso reach nichoach Hashem, mina bakar o min hatzon, right? Large animal, small animal. V'hikriv hamakriv korbanot Hashem minchat solet isaron, balu berevit hahin shemen. Right, the mincha, the grain, and the oil get all mixed up together, but not the wine. V'yain l'nesach. The yain is just separately poured onto the altar. Revi tahin taseh al haora ola zevach lekeves hayachad, for one thing. There's a different ratio for
Right.
oil. For oil, the ratios change, but the wine is always just a separate libation poured separately onto the altar. So if you don't have one, if you don't have wine, you can still offer your sacrifice. If you don't have, if you didn't have any solet,
Then you'd have a problem.
You could still offer the yain, right?
Right.
Without the
But
solet,
the
you can
oil
still
and the
offer the
flour
yain.
go together.
The oil and the flour cannot be separated because they're mixed in together, so they can't be separate. Hamatanot she'al hamizbeach hachitzon. Here's your beloved mizbeach hachitzon, the outer altar. Einan me'akvot zo et zo. So there are some korbanot have that 4, and some only have 1 matana. Matana is an application of blood to the corner of the altar. Right, that's where the blood was poured onto the altar. That was the main part of the sacrifice. You would bring the blood to the altar and pour it onto. So if you have to do 4, it doesn't, and you do 1, you've effectively done your sacrifice. Let's say all the blood would fall out, right? You trip on the altar and your basin of blood falls out, but you put 1 application onto the altar. That's going to be enough to count. Now, interestingly, this is Beit Hillel's opinion. Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel are close. Where is this Mishnah? I found it from. It's in Zevachim. Beit Shammai omrim kol hanitanim al mizbeach hachitzon she'im natana achat kiper. Right. Beit Shammai say, for the most part, if you just did 1 spritz of the blood on the altar, it's enough. Ubechatat shtei metanot. But when it's a chatat, you need 2. Otherwise, it's not going to count. Well, Beit Hillel omrim af chatat sheditna matana achat kiper. The same thing with a chatat. 1 is enough. Which is interesting that Menachot seems to agree with Beit Hillel. Right? I think that often happens. People often ask, well, at what point in time in history did they decide that the halacha was always going to follow Beit Hillel? A lot of scholars have written about that, right? There's an Agada about that. There are Amoraim in the Bavli who are still po v'sham paskening, early Amoraim, paskening in the Yerushalmi too, who are paskening like Beit Shammai, but it's unusual, very unusual. And the Bavli doesn't expect people to do that. And here's an example you can see even in the Mishnah. The Mishnah itself is ruling like Beit Shammai. That's not 100%, but it's usual. There are mishnayot that agree with Beit Shammai, anonymous mishnayot. Okay, haparim v'ha'elim v'ha'kvasim enan ma'akvin ze et ze. So these are the musaf sacrifices for Rosh Chodesh and the holidays, here in both Bamidbar and Vayikra, and they're all independent, right? You've got bulls and you've got rams and you've got lambs. One doesn't prevent the observance of the other. Rabbi Shimon Omer, im hayu lehem parim merubim, v'lo hayu lehem nesachim. So interesting, Rabbi Shimon says, like, if you have a lot of cows or bulls and you don't have enough, the nesachim here are the mincha and the wine, the grain, the oil, and the wine. What do? Yaviu par echad nesacha v'lo yikravu kulan b'lo nesachim. You should bring only 1, and it's better not to do all of them, even without their proper libations that go along with them. Right? Interesting opinion. Hapar, now the next Mishnah. Hapar ve'elimu kasim v'hasair einan me'akvin et alechem v'lo alechem me'akvan. So this is particularly Shavuot. We're getting back to Shavuot has a bread offering. So we're back to Shavuot. And I brought the verses over here. It's like confusing because there's a lot of sacrifices on Shavuot. So we don't have to read all the verses, but in Vayikra Kav Gimel, you get Shivat Kvasim. I highlighted them over here. 7 lambs. And then you've got a Sa'ir, that's a goat. And then you've got 2 more lambs for oh, and you've got a Par Ben Bakar, right? You've got a bull, and you've got rams, Elim, right? You've got all these
I
different.
learned that rams are grown-up sheep.
Yes, rams are male grown-up sheep, I believe.
Yep.
Never
Yeah.
knew that.
Never
Yeah.
knew that. Yeah.
Yeah.
I love learning about, like, there's all sorts of things, people ask me, well, how do I know so much about farming? I'm like, I learned Gemara. There's a lot
Yeah.
about farming in the Gemara. The problem is sometimes it's not like, if you want to go out and tend your garden, it's probably good to look for like a modern guide to how to garden and not just like learn Gemara. But yeah, it's very helpful. I'll tell you a funny story. I once had a student studying with me from Germany. This was like 20 years ago. And we were taking a field trip to Neot Knumim, is this biblical kind of area where they've cultivated biblical trees and plants and also animals. So we took a field trip with the class there, and he told me, he showed us how to herd the sheep. And I realized, I'm like, oh my God, you're a German shepherd. And it was very funny because we had been learning Bava Kama the whole time. And the Bava Kama, we were learning the 6th chapter of Bava Kama is called Hakonis et Hatzon, someone who gathers the sheep. And talks about the damages done by goats and sheep and other animals. And it was really amazing. He also taught me another thing. You never know when you're going to learn something you'll never forget. He told me the reason why there's so many of the korbanot are from male animals is because farmers don't want to keep very many male animals.
Because they cause damage.
Exactly. They cause a lot of problems. The female animals will have baby animals. So obviously you need a couple male animals, but you don't need that many. So I remember saying at the time, like, I'm very thankful that like humans haven't adopted this, because otherwise there's not going to be too many of me around all that more. And, let's face it, we do cause a lot of problems too. But
I
it was
was
very
on a
interesting.
kibbutz for a year. That's how I know that.
Oh yeah, which kibbutz were you on?
En Surim.
Ooh, very nice, very nice. Yeah.
That's that's how I know that piece of information.
Yeah, it's fun to learn about all this stuff because a lot of us aren't, we're not farmers anymore. So right, and it's also even as a kid, and as also when you're learning Hebrew, it's fun to learn the names for the animals in Hebrew and because you've got the baby ones, you've got the older ones, and I don't know, I like learning them too. All right, and then I just wanted to show you where this comes from. Here's a good example, right? You've got all these, all of these different animals, but they each have their own pasuk. All right, you've got the Shivat Kvasim, and then you've got Upar and Elim. They're all independent. They're not, the verse doesn't really connect them together. And then you've got the bread, which appears both in verse 20 and verse 18, which is separate, right? The bread and the sacrifices, the animal sacrifices, don't prevent.
But it always says umin chasam,
No,
v'niskehem ishe reach nichoach l'Hashem.
yeah,
In
that's for
pasuk
the other one.
Yud-Chet.
That's in right.
Yud-Chet.
That's the other one. That's not the mincha. So let me just clarify. The mincha and the nesech over here are the ones that we saw that in general accompany, right, or in Bar Midvar Tetvav that we just read about before, that in
Right.
general accompany holiday and personal voluntary sacrifices. But then you also get the bread. That's a special offering for Shavuot.
Right, the Shnei Alechem.
Right. Vehinif hakohen otam al lechem habikorim. Vayikra doesn't call it, Vayikra calls it lechem habikorim. And then you get in Bamidbar Kafchet, you get mincha chadasha. Right. That's assumed to be the same thing, right? As in Vayikra. Right. The rabbis interpret mincha chadasha as being the lechem bikorim. Right. And we're going to get to all the verses. There's a lot of midrash on those verses. So we're going to get to that a little bit later on. Okay, Halechem me'akev et ha'kvasim, ha'kvasim eino me'akevim et halechem divrei Rabbi Akiva. So now we're going to talk about, right, we just talked about that the lechem doesn't prevent the general offering of the most of the stuff. But then you get, what about the kvasim that are ushne kvasim, right? Notice that there's two sets of kvasim in Vayikra, of lambs. You've got the shivat kvasim, and then you've got the shne kvasim, right?
Shnei
And those,
kvasim are specific to that holiday, and the shiva kvasim are brought with every holiday, I think.
and Pesach, Sukkot has that. Sukkot, yeah, they
14.
all have. No, that's the bulls. They all have the. They all have the Shiva Kvasim. I think you're right. I mean, I'd have to look up all the psukim again. But
I think Sukkot has double because it's from 2 cycles.
okay, I'll take your word for it for now. But the lechem that we're talking about over here and the kvasim are the Shavuot, the special 2 kvasim for Shavuot. Right, these are all, the first 7 are all olot, right, whole burnt offerings, and the next 2 are edible ones. So the zevach means they're mostly eaten. So there's an interesting little machloket over here, and it's good to have a little machloket. According to the Rabbi Akiva, the lechem prevents the eating of the lambs, meaning if you don't have the bread, you can't sacrifice the lambs. But the lambs don't stop you from offering the lechem, according to Rabbi Akiva. So if you can't offer those lambs, you can still offer the lechem.
Okay.
Amar Shimon ben, probably my guess is that it's because there's a separate verse for it. Right? If you look in Vayikra, there's a whole nother verse that just talks about the lechem independently. And so since there's an independent verse, you don't have the kvasim and the lechem tied into each other. That's Rabbi Akiva. But Shimon ben Nanas, who has a few disputes here and there with Rabbi Akiva, obviously he's a more minor Tana, Loki, he says no. Ela hakvasim ma'akvim et halechem, v'halechem eino me'akev et hakvasim. It's the opposite way. Without the lambs, you can't offer the bread, but the bread doesn't prevent the offering of the lambs. And now he explains why. Shekain matzinu, right? Because it happened. Shayu b'Yisrael b'midbar 40 shana karvu kvasim below lechem, afkan yikarvu kvasim below lechem. So when Israel was in the midbar, they offered lambs even though there was no bread. So too here in the Beit HaMikdash, long after the time in the Midbar, there's a precedent for offering lambs without bread. Now, where does that come from? The Torah says, "Mimoshvotechem taviu lechem tnufa." Bring that lechem that's going to be waved from your settlements, right? Which Shimon ben Nanas reads as only after the entry to the land.
Right.
So they didn't.
Kitavola aretz. Yeah.
You get that in we're going to get that in a minute, but this is a different pasuk. We're going to get Rabbi Shimon bringing that pasuk. There's a lot of confusion, a lot of machlokot about what mitzvot they only did in the land and what mitzvot they were already doing in the midbar. So this is one of them, right? And Mimoshvotechem, Ben Nana says, look, the bread wasn't brought until after, but Shimon ben Nanas would hold that all the korbanot that are listed in Vayikra were done in the midbar. Right, the regular korbanot, the animal korbanot, were done in the wilderness. But Rabbi Shimon's going to disagree with him. Amar Rabbi Shimon halacha kedivrei ben Nanas. The halacha actually follows ben Nanas. Interesting that he doesn't call him by his first name. Right, he does appear a few places. Right. By the way, it's very interesting. I was reading someone the other day who, we were talking about the Chachamim around Rabbi Akiva. There's a lot of Chachamim mentioned that are around Rabbi Akiva, but the only reason they're there is because they have machlokot with Rabbi Akiva. They never appear independently. In other words, Rabbi Akiva was the star. There were obviously other Talmidei Chachamim around the same time as Rabbi Akiva, but for the most part, they sort of revolve around his son, if you will. and they very rarely appear individually. Unlike, let's say, a generation later, Rabbi Shimon, Rabbi Meir, Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Yossi appear individually. None of them was like greater than the others. But Rabbi Akiva seems to have largely outshined any of the other sages. Not all of them, but mostly in his generation. And therefore, you have lots of people who are named, but they only appear in Machlokot with Rabbi Akiva. Right? Shimon ben Anas is certainly one of them. You don't hear about him too much. Rabbi Shimon is a generation later. Halacha k'divrei ben Nanas. So he does say the halacha follows ben Nanas. I also, by the way, assume that probably a lot of people disagreed with Rabbi Akiva a lot, and they lost their halachic arguments, and they didn't even make it into the Mishnah.
And that was it.
Right. They
They rode off
don't
into the
mention that.
sunset.
Right. What's the purpose of mentioning Shimon ben Nanas if you're not going to halacha is not going to be like him, and that's what happens. So halacha k'divrei ben Nanas. I'm interested in this because I'm writing a book about the Tanaim right now.
But don't we, I mean, I've never learned Gemara. I have to admit that at the outset.
No problem. Yeah.
But aren't there often people whose halacha we don't follow and we mention them?
Yes. I'm not making this in a general argument. What I'm saying is about the generation. There's something different about the generation of Rabbi Akiva. That Rabbi Akiva, I think more so than pretty much any other Tana, was like, when you go earlier, you've got Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Yoshua, Rabban Gamliel. There's not an easy hierarchy between them. They argue all the time. And I'm just looking even just at the Mishnah itself. They argue all the time, and it's unclear. I don't think you could say that one was above the other. The same thing a generation later than Rabbi Akiva, which is primarily Rabbi Shimon, Rabbi Meir, Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Yossi. Those four guys and a few others. They appear all the time, and there's definitely not one. They're just different. They're not one above the other.
When was Hillel and Shammai?
Hillel
That's
and Shammai
later?
Much earlier.
Oh, much earlier.
Yeah. The general, like, let's say, order of generations would be, right, Hillel and Shammai are about as far back as we go. Before Hillel and Shammai, it's sort of shrouded in mystery.
Okay.
And then especially you get Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel. Right, Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel have far more traditions than Hillel and Shammai. Right, Beit Shammai and Hillel, Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel have a lot of disputes. Also, right, and then you get, that's probably still in the temple period, and then you start getting the post-temple rabbis, the early post-temple rabbis, namely Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. And right, if we try to follow in a very linear, there's a lot more people, and the real world was like more populated with people. But the primary guys after Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai are Rabbi Gamliel, Rabbi Eliezer, and Rabbi Yoshua. Right, they start to appear. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai appears a little bit in the Mishnah, but not that much. Right, not that much. Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Yoshua appear a lot in the Mishnah, tons and tons of times. So that by that point, you start to have mishnayot being recorded massively, and people are remembering the traditions and they're remembering the names they go with. You start to get them arguing with each other. They argue with each other all the time. And then in the generation after that is Rabbi Akiva. Right? There's a few other guys there too. There's Rabbi Tarfon, there's Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, there's Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri. There's a few other guys who seem to be prominent, but Rabbi Akiva
towers over them.
Yeah, he towers way over anybody else. And then you get the generation afterwards, it starts to work like equals again. This is schematic. There's other people.
I get it.
And then then after that is pretty much the end of the Mishnah. Then we get Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, who's the end of the Mishnah. And that generation statements, there's a few of them in the Mishnah, but for the most part, the Mishnah sort of ends by then, and it's being edited, put together, composed, and then that's it, right?
There's and Shmaya and Avtalion, like the people from Pirkei Avos.
But we have like almost nothing from them. We have, right, the beginning, we have like three machlokot, three debates in the beginning of Masechet Eduyot, right? And there's what they call the zugot, and look in the beginning of
from Pirkei Avot,
right, from Pirkei Avot. So, but those are like legendary figures that we don't have a lot of halachic information about them. The historical memory of them is a little bit cloudy. When my book comes out, you'll get it. You'll enjoy my book.
Okay, good. Looking forward.
We're working hard on it. That's what the book, what we try to do is we try to talk about how do we know these things? Where do they come from? right? What are the texts? The things that we say we know, what are the texts that show us those things?
What's the data?
Yeah. What are the texts, and how do the stories change over time, and how did the legends develop? Anyway, let's read at least Rabbi Shimon over here. Remember, Rabbi Shimon,
Okay.
right? Which is also interesting, right? The reasoning isn't like him, right? Which is important. The Mishnah wants to show the reasoning and not just the halacha. Shekoha more bechumash hapikudim. So let's see if you can figure out. Bamidbar. Yeah, Chumash hapikudim. In English, what would we call that?
The numbers.
Numbers, right? I always like that because the Hebrew, the original Hebrew, and the way the rabbis refer to it is similar to the way the Greeks referred to it. But the way we refer to it is just by the first word.
Right.
We call it Bamidbar, which is, just the first word. Right. The same thing with Dvarim and Vayikra and all those other things. All right. So anything that was mentioned in Bamidbar, Kara Bamidbar, that was sacrificed already in the wilderness. V'chol ha'amor b'torata kohanim, which is
Vayikra,
lo Kara Bamidbar, right? And he gets that from here. You get ki tavo el haaretz. Daber el b'nei Yisrael v'amart alehem ki tavo el haaretz. When you come to the land, asher ani noten lechem uktzartem tzira ve'etem et omer reshit ktsirchem el hakohen. Right, that's the omer, which is what all these sacrifices that we're talking about that go in that series of sacrifices that beginning from the omer through Shavuot. Right, that was not done in the Midbar. Right, and so therefore the kvasim are already there in Bamidbar, but the
bread.
Right. He says, right. Right. The lechem, right, for the omer wasn't done until later on. Okay, lechem for the omer and the bread. Misha ba'aretz kavru elu. Okay. Now I have to answer. Umipnei ma ani omer yikruvu kvasim below lechem. So how do I know you can offer the lambs without bread? Shakvasim matirin et atzman below lechem. The lambs have, animal sacrifices have what's called a matir. We learn this in Zevachim and in Menachot. The matir is what allows us to eat the flesh. Right? These are Zevachim, they're edible sacrifices, and you can eat the flesh once the blood has been put onto the altar. The blood being put onto the altar is the matir. Right. So once the blood has been put onto the altar, the keves can be eaten. Lechem below kvasim, but how can you eat the lechem? There's nothing matir. Right? There's no matir independently for the lechem. Ein li mi yitirenu. There's no one for me to allow you to eat it. Right? There's no matir. So without a matir, you can't eat the lechem. It's not. I think what he's saying is it's not that the lechem inherently goes with the kvasim. It's just every sacrifice needs a matir in order to eat it, and animal sacrifices have a built-in matir, the blood. But and by the way, the mincha has a matir also, the komets.
The komets, right?
Matir. But the lechem here doesn't have a komets from it, right? It's just eaten.
And
right?
what would the nesach have? What would the yayin have? Or it doesn't?
No, the yayin's not eaten.
Oh, that's given to the kohen?
It's all put on the altar.
Oh, it's poured all of it.
Just pour it all totally onto the altar.
Okay.
Right.
Thank you, everyone, for joining. Please note, we will not meet next week on the 21st. We will be meeting on October 5th and October 12th. Take care, everyone.